Fines don't scare billionaires. They pay and move on. But when a judge tried to make an example of Elon Musk, she didn't realize. She had just stepped into a battle she wasn't ready for. San Francisco's federal courtroom was packed. Lawyers whispered, reporters adjusted their cameras, and the air buzzed with quiet anticipation. Judge Karen Whitmore, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, entered with the authority of someone who had already decided the outcome. She didn't waste time. The court finds Mr. Musk guilty of corporate misconduct. A fine of $50 million is imposed, effective immediately. A hush settled. The city attorney smirked. Case closed. But then, Musk did something no one expected. He didn't argue. He didn't flinch. He simply leaned back, tapped his fingers on the table, and smiled. Not a forced grin. Not arrogance. It was something else, something unsettling. Judge Whitmore felt it. A shift. A challenge. And in that moment, she realized this wasn't just about a fine. This was about control. And she had just lost the upper hand. And the worst part? The fight hadn't even begun. The federal courtroom in San Francisco was packed. Reporters whispered, cameras clicked, and legal experts exchanged knowing glances. This was supposed to be just another case, another corporate executive paying a fine and moving on. Judge Karen Whitmore sat tall behind the bench, her expression firm. She had made a career out of holding powerful figures accountable, and today was no different. She flipped through the case file, eyes scanning the details one last time. Across the room, City Attorney James Leland adjusted his tie. He had handled cases against big names before, but this was different. This was Elon Musk, a man known for defying rules, pushing limits, and questioning authority. Still, Leland was certain of the outcome. The evidence was solid. The fine was non-negotiable. Musk sat at the defense table, casually flipping through a stack of papers. His posture was relaxed, his expression unreadable. While most defendants fidgeted or exchanged whispers with their lawyers, he barely glanced at his legal team. He didn't seem concerned. Judge Whitmore cleared her throat and spoke without hesitation. After reviewing the facts, this court finds Mr. Musk in violation of Section 14C of corporate governance law. A fine of $50 million is imposed, payable immediately. The courtroom fell silent. A few reporters scribbled notes. Others watched, waiting for Musk's reaction. Most assumed he would nod, sign a check, and be done with it. Instead, he simply raised an eyebrow. He didn't protest. He didn't argue. He didn't even glance at his attorneys. He just tapped his fingers lightly against the table, once, twice, before resting his hands in his lap. Something about his silence felt deliberate. Judge Whitmore caught the shift in the room. She had seen plenty of corporate executives before. Some defiant, some apologetic, some simply indifferent. But Musk was different. She leaned forward slightly. Mr. Musk, do you have anything to say before this court moves forward? For the first time, he looked up. His voice was calm, measured. Just one thing, Your Honor. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Then, with the slightest hint of amusement, he continued. Are we skipping the part where I get to defend myself? The courtroom shifted. The city attorney stiffened. Judge Whitmore's eyes narrowed, her fingers tightening around her gavel. She had expected compliance. What she got instead was the beginning of something else. Something much bigger. Musk leaned back in his chair, his fingers lightly tapping the table. His expression was calm, almost amused. The silence in the courtroom stretched longer than expected, and it was starting to make people uneasy. Judge Whitmore narrowed her eyes. Mr. Musk, the court has made its ruling. Your fine is final. Musk finally spoke, his voice smooth but firm. Your Honor, with all due respect, I wasn't aware due process had been updated to guilty until proven innocent. A murmur ran through the room. The city attorney straightened his posture, suddenly more alert. Judge Whitmore's expression tightened. I suggest you choose your words carefully, Mr. Musk. He nodded almost playfully. Of course. Let's clarify something before we proceed. Are you saying I have no right to challenge a ruling based on incomplete evidence? The judge exhaled through her nose. The evidence is clear. Musk tilted his head slightly. "That's interesting," he said, flipping through a document in front of him. "Because the very law you're referencing has been successfully challenged in court multiple times." The room grew still. Some reporters exchanged glances. The legal clerks whispered among themselves. This was supposed to be routine and easy, fine, no pushback. But Musk had just turned the hearing into something else entirely. The city attorney, James Leland, cleared his throat. "Your Honor, this is a waste of the court's time. Mr. Musk was given a fair review, and the penalty is well within legal parameters." Musk raised an eyebrow. "Fair review? Is that what we're calling it?" He turned a page in his file, though it was clear he didn't need to read it. He already knew what was there. "Because from where I'm sitting, this ruling ignores established legal precedent." Judge Whitmore's grip on her gavel tightened. "Mr. Musk, I suggest you make your point, quickly." Musk exhaled, as if deciding how much to say. Then he looked directly at the judge. "The law doesn't work based on convenience. If it's clear, it applies to everyone. If it's vague, it can be challenged. You just find me under a statute that has been overturned in multiple cases for being too broad. So tell me, Your Honor, are we following the law today, or just making it up as we go?" The tension in the room sharpened. Even the bailiff, who had seen thousands of hearings, shifted slightly. Judge Whitmore set her jaw. "That statute has been upheld just as many times as it has been challenged. Your case does not meet the criteria for an exception." Musk smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's a bold claim. Let's test it." He slid a document toward his attorney but spoke directly to the judge. According to Reynolds v. Clearwater, 2019, financial penalties issued under Section 14C must be backed by concrete evidence of direct financial harm. He tapped the paper lightly. "Where is that evidence in my case?" Silence. The city attorney shifted in his seat. Judge Whitmore's lips pressed together. Musk continued, "I'll save you some time. There isn't any, because it doesn't exist." Judge Whitmore took a slow breath. "Mr. Musk, this court does not exist for theatrics." He nodded. "I agree, which is why I'm surprised you ruled without solid proof." A few people in the gallery exchanged glances. Even those who weren't lawyers could see what was happening. Musk was shifting the power in the room. Judge Whitmore knew it too. For the first time, she hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. Musk leaned forward slightly. "I have no problem paying a fine if the law justifies it. But if we're setting a precedent where billion-dollar penalties can be handed out without clear evidence, then this case isn't just about me. It's about every business in this country." The room was dead silent. Judge Whitmore glanced at the city attorney, who avoided eye contact. Musk sat back. "So tell me, Your Honor, are you really willing to go on record saying evidence doesn't matter?" The judge inhaled slowly, choosing her next words carefully. But Musk had already made his move, and for the first time, Judge Whitmore wasn't sure how to counter it. Judge Whitmore's fingers drummed lightly against the bench. Her expression remained firm, but there was a shift in her posture, small but noticeable. Musk had thrown her off balance, and for the first time in the hearing, the control she held so tightly seemed to waver. She straightened. "Mr. Musk, this court does not entertain theatrics." Musk exhaled lightly, tilting his head. "Oh, I agree. Let's stick to the law then." His voice was even, his tone measured, but the challenge in his words was clear. Judge Whitmore's jaw tightened. "The law has already been applied. You are in violation. The fine stands." Musk leaned back, almost amused. "That's an interesting take, Your Honor, because according to legal precedent, that's not how this works." The room grew tense. The city attorney, James Leland, shifted uncomfortably. Musk continued, unfazed. Reynolds v. Clearwater, 2019. McAllister v. SEC 2021. Both cases ruled that financial penalties imposed without clear evidentiary thresholds are unconstitutional. He let the words settle before adding, "And yet, here we are." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Reporters whispered. Legal analysts exchanged glances. The judge wasn't just facing a challenge. Musk was systematically boxing her in. Judge Whitmore's fingers curled slightly on the bench. The cases you mention are circumstantial. They do not apply here. Musk barely blinked. They do when the violation cited lacks measurable proof of harm. He tapped a document lightly. You're imposing a financial penalty without a clear connection to financial damage. That's exactly what those rulings addressed. Leland interjected, clearing his throat. Your Honor, I must object. Musk turned to him, his voice cutting. Counselor, I'd love to hear your counterargument. That is, if you have one. Leland hesitated. His lips parted slightly, but no words followed. Silence. Musk tilted his head slightly. Nothing? Interesting. He turned back to the judge. That's what I thought. Judge Whitmore inhaled slowly, glancing at the papers in front of her. Her grip on control was slipping, and she knew it. Musk didn't wait. Let's get something straight. This is not about the fine. It's about the fact that, under this court's own precedent, this ruling is flawed. The tension in the room thickened. Every eye was now on Judge Whitmore. She shifted in her chair. Mr. Musk, this court has discretion in its rulings. Musk nodded slowly. Yes, Your Honor. But discretion is not exemption from legal standards. Leland sat rigid, silent. The bailiff, usually indifferent, now watched with keen interest. Even a few clerks had stopped taking notes. Judge Whitmore's fingers pressed against the desk. Musk had built a trap, and she was stepping right into it. She squared her shoulders. This fine is justified. Musk sighed through his nose, almost disappointed. You keep saying that, but you still haven't proven it. He flipped a page, then added, It's almost as if you assumed I wouldn't question it. The room was still. Musk met the judge's eyes. So, tell me, Your Honor, are we following the law today? Or are we making up rules as we go? Judge Whitmore's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. A hesitation, a calculation. Then, without another word, she reached for her gavel. Bang. The court will reconvene in 15 minutes. The room buzzed. Murmurs, whispers, quiet shock. Musk leaned slightly toward his attorney, his voice low but sharp. That means we just won round one. And from across the bench, Judge Whitmore knew he was right. 15 minutes passed like an eternity. The courtroom murmured with quiet conversations, speculation filling the air. Musk remained seated, his expression unreadable, flipping through his papers though he barely glanced at them. He wasn't reading, he was waiting. When the heavy doors swung open, Judge Whitmore returned, but this time, she wasn't alone. A second judge entered beside her, his presence commanding immediate attention. The room shifted as people straightened in their seats. Judge Michael Harrington, a senior judge, higher ranking, more powerful, and his presence meant only one thing: this case had just escalated. Musk didn't react, but his eyes sharpened ever so slightly. He had expected this move. Judge Whitmore cleared her throat. Before we proceed, I've requested that Judge Harrington sit in on this matter. Requested. Musk knew that wasn't true. She hadn't called him in, someone else had. Harrington folded his hands in front of him. Mr. Musk, you've raised an interesting legal argument. However, are you aware that a follow-up ruling in McAllister v. SEC clarified that discretionary fines remain valid under localized jurisdiction? A solid move. A carefully chosen case. Musk allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile. He knew they'd try this. His voice remained steady. I'm aware. He leaned forward slightly. And I'm also aware that the clarification required all fines to include direct, measurable financial damages. A requirement missing in this case. Judge Whitmore's lips pressed together. The city attorney, sensing an opportunity, quickly interjected. Your Honor, this is irrelevant. Musk turned his head toward him, cutting him off with a quiet but firm tone. No, Counselor. He let the pause hang. It's the most relevant part of this case. Leland hesitated. Judge Harrington and Judge Whitmore exchanged glances. Musk continued, flipping to another page. The ruling in McAllister allowed for discretion only when the financial impact was clearly outlined in the ruling. So, let's get specific. He tapped his document. What exact financial harm did my statements cause? Silence. Judge Whitmore adjusted her posture. Mr. Musk, this court is not obligated to justify every fine with. Musk didn't let her finish. Actually, it is. If this ruling is based on financial loss, where is the evidence of it? The tension in the room thickened. Judge Harrington studied Musk carefully. He wasn't dismissing him, but he wasn't convinced yet either. What are you suggesting, Mr. Musk? Musk's voice remained calm. That this fine isn't based on damages. It's based on control. A ripple of murmurs ran through the gallery. Harrington leaned back slightly, considering his next words. Very well, he said, his voice steady. You may proceed. Musk nodded. He was ready for the next move. And for the first time, Judge Whitmore knew so was he. Musk stood slowly, gathering a few papers before stepping forward. His movements were controlled, deliberate. He wasn't just presenting an argument. He was setting up a checkmate. The city attorney shifted in his seat, sensing something was coming. Musk held up a document. This, he said, his voice calm, is an internal SEC email from 2 months ago. He let the words sink in before continuing. It states, and I quote, "No clear evidence of direct financial harm has been established in this case." The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Judge Whitmore's fingers stopped drumming against the bench. For the first time, she leaned forward. Musk glanced at the gallery, then turned back to the judge. So let's ask the real question. If the agency that issued this fine admits there's no damage, what exactly is this fine for? The city attorney's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth as if to respond but hesitated. He had nothing. Musk didn't press. He didn't need to. The courtroom had already felt the shift. Judge Whitmore exhaled slowly, her posture stiff. She had walked into this case believing she had complete control. But now that control was slipping fast. Musk turned slightly, resting his hands behind his back. Respectfully, Your Honor, I'm not arguing against accountability. I'm arguing for consistency. Either this fine follows legal precedent, or it doesn't. No one spoke. Judge Harrington adjusted his glasses. He was no longer just observing, he was evaluating. Musk had not only dissected the case but had left the court with a decision it didn't want to make. Judge Whitmore cleared her throat. Her voice was steady, but there was a weight to it now. Mr. Musk, do you believe this court has acted outside of legal bounds? Musk's reply was instant. I believe this ruling was made with the expectation that I wouldn't question it. Another murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Whitmore's grip tightened on her gavel. The ruling was no longer just in question, it was unraveling, and everyone knew it. Judge Whitmore sat motionless. The weight of the moment pressed down on the courtroom like a thick fog. She glanced at the document in front of her, then at the city attorney, whose expression had shifted from confidence to quiet defeat. She exhaled slowly, adjusting her posture. This court finds that the imposed fine does not meet the necessary evidentiary threshold for enforcement. She paused, letting the words settle before delivering the final blow. The fine is overturned. The silence was deafening. Then came the sound of pens scribbling, fingers typing, reporters rushing to record the decision. The energy in the room shifted. It was no longer a case. It was a moment that would be talked about long after the hearing ended. Musk didn't react immediately. No smirk, no gloating. He simply nodded once, calm as ever, before gathering his papers. To him, the outcome had never been in doubt. The city attorney sat frozen, staring at the bench as if willing the decision to change. It wouldn't. The ruling was final. Judge Harrington, who had been observing in silence, studied Musk for a long moment. There was something unreadable in his expression, not admiration, but not dismissal either. Respect, perhaps, or recognition. As Musk turned to leave, Judge Whitmore spoke again. Her voice was quieter this time. Mr. Musk, I underestimated you. He stopped, looked back. A faint smile crossed his face. You wouldn't be the first. Without another word, he walked toward the exit, his footsteps steady, the tension in the room lingering like an unfinished conversation. Outside, reporters swarmed, cameras flashed, voices shouted questions. But Musk didn't stop. He had already won the battle. Yet, he knew better than anyone, victories like this don't go unnoticed. Somewhere, in another office, another courtroom, someone was already preparing for the next fight. Because power doesn't surrender easily. And neither did he. The courtroom doors swung shut behind Musk, leaving the weight of his victory behind. The battle had ended, but the ripple effect had just begun. This wasn't just about a fine. It was about challenging power, questioning authority, and proving that even the strongest institutions could be held accountable. Musk didn't just fight the case, he rewrote the rules. But battles like these don't go unnoticed. Somewhere, another regulator, another judge, another courtroom was already watching, already planning. Because when you refuse to back down, you don't just win, you become a problem for those who expect compliance. And if history has proven anything, it's that Elon Musk doesn't just accept decisions. He changes them. If the story kept you hooked, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Because in every fight, in every courtroom, there's always more than meets the eye. And this was just the beginning.